everyone, and welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. So first, I want to go ahead and just welcome you. Today's webinar is going to provide us with an overview of South Arts cross-sector impact grants. And this program is made possible due to generous support from the National Endowment for the Arts. So I want to make sure we acknowledge them as the lead funder for this program, making it possible. So our agenda, what are we going to cover today? So first, we will have some introductions of the South Arts staff and support that is here today. We're then going to do an overview of the program. We'll then dig in a little bit more and look at what the program requirements are. And then we will have ample time for Q&A or question and answers. The Q&A for this program will be handled via the chat, so please feel free to drop your questions into the chat at any time as we are going through the webinar. And then at the end, as I said, I expect we will have a good amount of time there at the end to answer those questions. So jumping right into our introductions, and I see Joy is here today, so I want to hand it over to her for an introduction.
Well, hello, everyone. We're so glad you could join us here for our Cross-Sector Impact Grants webinar. Again, I'm Joy Young, Vice President of Programs here at South Arts. South Arts is your regional arts agency serving our 9 states, from North Carolina to Florida, over to Louisiana, and up to Kentucky. With these grants, we want to encourage our local arts communities to reach out to non-arts organizations, to develop partnerships that are meaningful to the community, to develop partnerships that utilize the arts in unique and innovative ways. We're wanting our partnerships this year to also focus on arts and equity, specifically diversity. We at South Arts have embraced equity and diversity as a key component to our work moving forward. And this commitment from a regional level is also reflected in the Biden administration's focus on equity in its work at the NEA. So know that any programs that focus on bringing together communities, diverse communities, BIPOC communities, LGBTQIA+ communities are certainly welcomed as applicants as well as potential grantees. We want to thank you again for your time. You are in excellent hands with Michelle as she continues to walk you through the process. Please do ask questions. We are very happy to assist you. And again, enjoy today's webinar. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you so much, Joy. Ivan Shustak, Director of Communications, is also here a little bit in stealth mode. I believe he may show up on your screen as South Arts. Ivan is here today to help support us through this webinar. He is monitoring the chat for us with those questions and is also available for tech support if you have any issues with the webinar. Ivan, I don't know if you wanted to say a quick hello to everyone.
Sure. Hi, my name is Ivan Shustak. I'm the Director of Communications with South Arts, and I appreciate you all being here and learning more about the cross-sector impact grants. We're very excited to offer this program to you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ivan. And I'm Michelle Grove Herzog, as I mentioned. I am the cross-sector impact grants consultant for South Arts. My firm is Zog Arts Consulting, and I am absolutely thrilled to be working with South Arts again for the 3rd time to oversee and administer this program for them. So our next slide here, and Joy has covered so much of this for us already in terms of what is South Arts, in terms of being your regional arts organization covering that 9-state jurisdiction in the southeast of the United States. Joy, if there's anything you want to add about the overall of South Arts, I'll pause here for a moment, and if not, we'll jump right in.
Well, not to take up too much time, Michelle, but certainly I think it's important for folks on this webinar to know that we serve in 4 primary areas of working with arts organizations, individual artists, communities, as well as work convening people. We work in partnership with our 9 state arts agencies. Again, I've already shared with you the states, and we are an intermediary between the NEA and our states. We have signature programs such as In These Mountains that focuses on the Appalachia region. We have Jazz Road Tours that works with jazz artists nationwide. So those are just 2 examples of programs that serve artists and communities. Examples of programs that serve our performing arts areas would be our arts touring grants, which are now open to accept grant applications. We recently held the Creative Placemaking Summit. It served and continues to serve our communities that engage creative placemaking as ways to engage the arts in community development. So understanding that we're working with arts organizations, individual artists, communities, and working with convening, hopefully will help you think about how you craft an application for this particular grant category, cross-sector impact grants. I'd urge you to visit our website, southarts.org, to learn more about the other ways we provide services to our region. So Michelle, there you go.
Thanks, I appreciate it, Joy. And I'll just emphasize that as we're going through, if you realize that this program might not be the right fit for you and or your project, again, as Joy mentioned, I encourage you to check the South Arts website and look at the many other opportunities that are available there as well. But on that note, what are cross-sector impact grants? So as mentioned, this is the 3rd round of this program. So we're really pleased to have offered 2 cycles of this program thus far, and to be offering a 3rd round of this program. So this program is designed to support partnership projects between the arts and non-arts sectors in creating or developing programs that address the challenges and strengths that our communities face today. So, for example, eligible projects may include programs which address arts and aging, arts and nutrition, or arts and homelessness, as well as, and we are particularly interested in programs that address arts and equity. Now, when I say arts, I mean arts in all forms. This is open only to performing art programs or visual arts programs, or very specific disciplines, even within those broader categories. It is open to all forms. And for projects which are new to this program, we do encourage projects and applications from new partnerships. However, projects which deepen or expand existing partnerships are also encouraged to apply. Now, South Arts is committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and has prioritized this commitment to ensure that Black, Indigenous, and people of color-led LGBTQIA+ led organizations and organizations representing persons with disabilities are represented as both applicants and grantees. So we encourage applications for projects that engage a broad spectrum of diversity. In addition, this program specifically, priority will be given to projects taking place in rural, small, or isolated communities. Now, applicants are encouraged to think expansively about possibilities for projects and partnerships, and to think about creative and varied approaches. This is really, program supports those innovative ideas to address challenges in our communities using the arts. I will note this program is not designed to support ongoing, what we might think of as kind of traditional outreach programs, but rather to help applicants leverage partnerships and truly work together to create impactful programs. Now, The other thing that I will note about this grants program is that while I noted this is the third round, and there will be an opportunity for previous grantees to apply for continued support through this program, this webinar is going to focus on new applicants to this program and that LOI process. So moving forward, a bit more of an overview of this program. Why was this program created? So first, this program addresses two of South Art's strategic goals, which are to connect artists and arts professionals in the South to resources that will increase opportunities for success within and outside the region, and to advance impactful arts-based programs that recognize and address trends and evolving needs of a wide range of communities in the South. From there, we know that partnership and working across sectors can bring new opportunity, increased effectiveness, and greater depth to our work. We also know that the arts and artists play an absolutely incomparable role in addressing challenges and strengths in our communities. And of course, rapid change is happening in communities around the country and in the South. This past year, including the COVID-19 epidemic, has only increased our need for programs like this, which allow us to strengthen our communities using the arts, harnessing the power of that arts and. Now, the last piece of this overview is I do want to go over the timeline for this program, which is, of course, incredibly important. The first is the letter of interest deadline. And again, this is the piece that we will be focusing on for this webinar today. Now, the letter of interest is due on Monday, March 22nd. That's 2 weeks from today, 2021, and that's at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. For the next step, for those of you that do submit a letter of interest, you'll be notified of the status of your letter of interest the week of April 5th, on or around that Monday, April 5th of 2021. Next, for those that are invited to submit a full application, the deadline is Monday, May 3rd, 2021. And those that submit applications will be notified the week of May 24th, with the project period for this program taking place between June 15th of 2021 and December 31st of 2022. Now, as we're seeing here, and this program does use a two-step process for new applicants. So that is a letter of interest and then a full application. And so this two-part application is really to help lower the barrier to entry and reduce the burden on potential applicants by only requiring a very relatively short overview of the program through the letter of interest process. This reduces the burden by not having everyone go through that full, and we know how that some grant applications can be a little bit longer, but we don't have to go through that full process to see if your program will be a good fit for this grants program. Now, to give you a little bit of context, this program, we do expect it to be competitive once again. In year one, we received approximately 160 letters of interest, did 28 submit full applications, and funded 13 projects. In year two, we received approximately 70 letters of interest, invited 17 of those to submit full applications, in addition to 12 continuing projects, and funded 14 projects. 4 of those were continuing and 10 were new. So again, we do expect this program to be competitive, but wanted to give a full overview of what that might mean. So let's a little bit deeper about what the requirements are for this program. And we're going to start with the partnership requirements. So for this program, we are looking for 2 principal partnering organizations or artists, one from the art sector and one from the non-art sector. Now, you're limited to 2 principal partners for this program. However, that doesn't mean that you cannot have additional individuals or organizations who might be involved in implementation of your project or who experience your project, but you may only have 2 principal partners for your application. Now, again, one of these partners must be from the arts sector, one must be from the non-art sector. So an example of this would be a nonprofit arts organization or a unit of government partnering with a nonprofit organization from the non-arts sector. Another example of a partnership might be an individual artist or ensemble partnering with a nonprofit organization from the non-art sector. I do want to note that, remember that we do need a partner from each of those 2 sectors. So an artist or an arts organization without a non-arts partner is ineligible for this program. I also want to note that for those additional individuals or organizations that may be involved in implementation, while we absolutely welcome that and it is allowable, no money may be exchanged with those additional implementing partners. So I do have a note here to step back. I think my audio may have cut out for a second for everyone, just to review the number of applicants last year for this program. So I am going to step back very quickly to that slide just to review that to make sure everyone could hear. And that is, so last year, which was year 2 of the program, we received approximately 70 letters of interest, invited 17 of those 70 to submit full applications, and funded 10 of those projects. In addition to those projects that were funded within those numbers, which were new to this program, there were 12 continuing projects who were eligible to submit an application, and we funded 4 of those continuing projects last year. So moving forward and talking a little bit about those 2 partners and the project that you may be proposing. What I have here is a list of sample arts disciplines. And what I will emphasize is that these are samples and not limiting. Absolutely any arts discipline is eligible. And then moving forward, again, a list of sample community impact areas for that non-arts partner. Once again, these are samples, these are not limiting, but we do want to give you a sense of what we mean by a community impact area. Now, applicant eligibility. And so this applies to these first bullet points here that I'm going to review apply to both of the partners. Both the arts partner and the non-arts partner must be located or reside, if it's an individual artist, in South Art's 9-state region. And just to review again, those 9 states included in the region are Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Now, both of those partners must be in good status with South Arts. And what does good status mean? This means that if you have engaged with South Arts in the past through a grant or other program, you must have completed all of your reports. So you must not have any outstanding reports. In addition, there is a federal disbarment list, and your organization cannot appear on that list. Which again means that you had not completed requirements for previous federal grants. I'll say that if you don't know what that list is, or you're not sure if it might apply to you, it probably doesn't. So it's just for institutions that have not completed some of those, the requirements of their grant in the past. And then lastly, Applicants must agree to acknowledge both South Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts should they receive a grant. Now, in addition to these requirements for both partners, a minimum of one of the partners, one of the applicants, must be a nonprofit tax-exempt organization, so a 501c3 organization. You are required to have that tax-exempt status, and that is something that is verified through an independent process for any applicants, or a unit of state or local government. Being a unit of state or local government often applies to locally controlled venues that might be owned by a city or a state. Again, if this applies to you, it is something that you're probably familiar with. In addition, one of the applicants must have a DUNS number. Again, this is an identifying number used for grants, and we do have information about that available within the guidelines, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you don't have a DUNS number and need more information about that. In terms of applicant eligibility, I do want to note that federal agencies or divisions of federal agencies are ineligible for this program. This is a federally funded program, and so funds cannot go back to federal agencies or divisions of federal agencies. And the other ineligible piece here is, while departments at universities or colleges are eligible as one of the partners, divisions or departments of a university cannot partner with another department or division at the same university. One of the partners must be outside of that university. So what are the project requirements? So as part of your project, your partnership project, you are required to have a minimum of 2 public-facing events, which are either virtual or in person. And this is in recognition of the times that we live in. These public-facing events may, for this round of grants, be virtual or in person. In addition, you must provide accessibility for constituents to attend these events. And in terms of in-person events, this may include accommodations, physical accommodations for individuals in order to attend, and for virtual accommodations to allow all persons to participate in and attend these events. Now, what do we mean by public-facing events? What we mean is that these events are open to and accessible by the public. Now, for these 2 public-facing events, one of them must be fully public and an activity that provides individuals with an arts experience or encounter. So for this event, you might think some sort of exhibit, or in person or virtual, a screening, a reading, or any other activity. Now, it may be free or it could be ticketed, but it must be marketed to and open to anyone who wishes to attend. Now, for your second event for this, your second public-facing event for this program, this could be an additional activity like the first that I just described, or it can be an activity that provides context or a deeper understanding of the arts experience, art form, or artistic process. And this second event may be for a targeted group, meaning a group of students, a business group, patients, or care providers. So again, it may be a fully open public event like the first event, but the second event may be for a targeted group as well. That is allowable. And of course, I want to emphasize this is a minimum. This is not a maximum. So you may provide many, many more than 2 public-facing events through your program. However, there must be a minimum of 2 that meet these requirements. The last piece I'll note about the project requirements, specifically as it relates to the times we're living in now, if you are producing or providing any in-person events, all local, state, and federal COVID regulations must be followed for that in-person event. Budget. I know this is always a big question when we're looking at grants. So for all projects, the minimum request for this program is $5,000. A 1 to 2 match is required. Now, what do we mean by a 1 to 2 match? It means for every grant dollar that is provided to you, you must contribute to the project as part of the project budget 50 cents. So if you were to receive a $5,000 grant, your match is a minimum of $2,500. Now, for your match, up to half of your match may be in kind. What does in kind mean? In kind is donated goods or services that have a cash value. So a value, something that you would have had to pay for in your budget otherwise, but that has been donated to you for use with your project. So to give another example, we're going to go with this same, if you were to receive a $5,000 grant, you must have a minimum match of $2,500, so $2,500, and up to half of that match, or $1,250 of it, may be in kind, meaning it may consist of donated goods or services. Now, your match does not have to be in kind. It may be fully cash, but this is an option for those who are receiving donated goods or services. The other piece I want to emphasize here for this program is that we do expect to fully fund grant requests. What this means is that you want to be realistic in building your budget, as you will receive most likely that full amount of the grant request. And I will say that historically, so for the past 2 years, we have fully funded all of grant requests. So this is not a program where you want to overreach or over ask with your grant in order to get what you really need. And it's important to be realistic to make sure that you can match your grant request that you put in. The last piece to go over on this slide is the maximum grant request. Now for new projects, which is what applies to most of us, if not all of us here in the webinar, the maximum grant request is $15,000. And if we do have 1 or 2 in here that are a continuing project, meaning you did receive grant support from South Arts through this program in the past, and will be applying to continue or advance that project, the maximum request is $10,000. So moving forward with talking about the budget for your project, what you see on the screen here is examples of eligible expenses and ineligible expenses. Now, for eligible expenses, these are examples. If you have a question, just ask. But most expenses directly related to carrying out your project are eligible. That said, the ineligible expenses listed here are non-negotiable. And I want to highlight that overhead indirect expenses are not eligible through this program. So again, we're looking for costs directly related to carrying out the funded project. A few other notes, common questions around eligible expenses in the budget. One is around temporary public art creation and or installation. As you'll note, that capital expenses are ineligible for this program, and sometimes public art, especially if it's a permanent installation, would be considered a capital expense. So for purposes of this grant program, we've defined temporary public art as designed to be exhibited or shown for not more than 1 year. The other thing that I'd like to note when we're talking about the budget is that these projects are not intended for the creation of new work as a central element of the project. However, that doesn't mean that artwork cannot be created through this program, and work that is created as a secondary outcome or in which community participants are integrally involved in the creative process is allowable. And again, if you have specific questions about your program, I will be happy to answer those moving forward. The last thing I will emphasize when we're looking at some of these budget requirements is even in the letter of interest process, we will look at this in a few slides, will be required to submit a preliminary overview of your budget and to be sure that there is consistency between that budget and the narrative. And remember that they go together, they are a pair, and what you indicate you're going to do in the narrative of your letter of interest should be reflected accurately in that budget as well. Now, how are we going to evaluate these projects? So what you see on the screen here is the review criteria. We will be evaluating the letters of interest on their potential to most closely address these. And then these are the criteria that will be used for the full application evaluation as well. I know that when I'm writing a grant or advising anyone on a grant, I always recommend printing out. I know I like to have a piece of paper, but printing out these review criteria and having them next to me as I'm writing so that I can refer back to them and be sure that my narrative and my budget are most closely it's possible addressing the evaluation or the review criteria. I will also add here as a reminder that priority for this in this program will be given to projects taking place in communities, rural areas, and that is areas that are geographically isolated and generally under 50,000 in population, and isolated communities. And this is communities which are isolated due to socioeconomic factors, outmigration, education gaps, and or lack of infrastructure. So in addition to this review criteria, there will be priority given to those projects. So what I have up here are some questions to ask yourself in terms of readiness to apply. And when we look at a grant program and when we're looking at this grant program, we'll often look at kind of the content of our project. But because this grant program is about a partnership, what we have here are some questions to think about in terms of the partnership. And one of the pieces that we will be looking for is if the partners have complementary strengths or resources that make this partnership necessary for success, and making sure that the partnership has been well thought out, meaning that responsibilities, who's doing what part of the project has been well thought out, including how the financial responsibilities will be divided. So these are just some questions to think about as you're looking at this grant program and finalizing your partnership and or your program. So we're going to look at the letter of interest, meaning what is required to submit a letter of interest. So the letter of interest will be submitted through an online portal. The name of the system is eGrant. For those of you that have submitted South Arts grants in the past, you're likely familiar with this program and already have an account set up that you can use for this cross-sector impact grants as well. So submitting through that online eGrant form, there are a few things that you'll submit. The first is a narrative, which totals about approximately 2 pages of text, just to give you a sense of how much writing is involved for this letter of interest. And you'll be asked to answer 3 questions in that narrative. And these 3 questions are the area of social or community impact that you're trying to influence in your community, and why or how the artistic component of this project will be effective in addressing it. You'll answer who the 2 partners are the nature of their relationship and why these partners are working together. And lastly, the main activities of this project, including where and when the project will take place. You'll also submit a preliminary budget using the South Arts template. That template is posted within the online eGrant form. And as noted here, it is a preliminary budget. So it is kind of a scaled back, bare bones budget. And if you are invited to submit a full application, you will submit a more fully thought out budget. And it is understood that the budget submitted with the letter of interest is preliminary, and things may change as you fully flesh out your project and that budget between the letter of interest and a full application. The last piece is demographic and basic information about both of the partners. And I'll just note that the demographic information requested is for informational purposes and is not part of the review process for these grants. The review process is based on the evaluation criteria that we went over just a few slides ago. And of course, you must submit your letter of interest through the online eGrant system no later than 6:00 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Monday, March 22nd, 2 weeks from today. I want to emphasize that the system will cut off at 6:00 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And we are not able, especially given the volume of letters that we expect to receive, we're not able to accept late or incomplete applications. So start early. Please get that letter of interest in advance of that 6:00 deadline so that we can review it. The last thing I want to go over here is just to give you a sneak peek of what that online eGrant system does look like for those of you who haven't used it before. So these are just a few screenshots showing you what that looks like. As I mentioned, it's an online form and you do have to create an account in order to use it. What's great is that should you be invited to submit a full application, you would, the information that you include in that online letter of interest form will be transferred to the full application. And then second, in that online form, you'll answer the narrative questions that we just reviewed and upload the budget. And this is just a quick snapshot of what that looks like. Now, we're just about at the time when we're going to be going into our questions, but I see that Susie Circumer, our Executive Director, I believe your title is now Chief Executive Officer of South Arts, has joined us, and I want to give her a chance to introduce herself.
Hello, everybody, and I obviously came in on Joy's link, and so it lists me as Joy Young also, so who is the real Joy Young? Anyway, yes, I'm Susie Circumer, President and CEO of South Arts, and was just so pleased to see how many people had signed up for this informational session. This is our third round of cross-sector impact grants, and the projects that have come out of these two rounds are really incredible. So I look forward to reading the letters of intent and applications from those of you that decide to apply, and also look forward to some really great work taking place between organizations for the community. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Michelle. Thanks so much, Michelle, for all of your work, and Joy for your work, Ivan, etc.
Absolutely. Thanks for stopping in, Susie. It's really nice to see you. So as I mentioned, we are wrapping up here. And while this webinar focused on the letter of interest process, I did want to give a few notes about that full application so that you can understand what to expect should you be invited to submit that full application. So again, the full application is by invitation only, other than for continuing projects. If you submit your letter of interest, notifications around the full application will go out the week of April 5th. So approximately 2 weeks after you submit that letter of interest. Full instructions on how to submit that application will be provided to applicants at that time, and you'll actually be invited to sign up for a one-on-one consultation if you're invited to submit that full application. So time to answer any questions and review the project with myself. So again, please don't stress about that full application at this point. If you're invited to submit the full applications, there will be a full set of instructions that go out at that time. And then those full applications will be due on Monday, May 3rd. Now on that note, as promised, we've gotten to our questions. I know that there have been a number of the questions that have come in, and Ivan is graciously going to provide us with some of those questions so that I can answer them for you. And if we don't have a chance to get to your question and it's not answered, please, I encourage you to check the South Arts website to check both the guidelines, and there's also an FAQ page which answers some of these frequently asked questions about this program. And then you can also reach out to me directly if your question isn't answered there. My email, which is partnerships@southarts.org. So on that note, we have a good 19 minutes left. Let's get into some of these questions. Ivan.
Great, thank you. So our first question is about the locations of partners and artists. Both lead partners are located within the southern region, but we would like to bring in an artist from outside the region due to the lack of representation within the region, and to help to build and foster more artists of this category. Is that allowed?
So for this program, we are focused on organizations and artists that are located within that 9-state region of South Arts. So it is the case that both of the partners and any additional individuals involved in implementation of the project must be based in one of located in, meaning reside, or their organization is located in the South. So that, it sounds like that specific situation, that artist would not be eligible as part of this program.
Great, thank you. Next question is from somebody who is applying through a university. Is there a published overhead rate for this grant? In the case of this person's university, there are standard overhead rates that they must apply unless a maximum overhead rate is published.
Great question. So going back to those budget requirements, this grant program is project specific and does not allow overhead or indirect expenses. So those expenses cannot be included in the budget for this grant program.
The next question is whether incarcerated people would be considered isolated populations for this program.
So that's a really interesting question, and I would say that almost needs a little bit more context. But what I will say is that we have had some, if you look back at the South Arts website, there is a publication of past funded projects. And we have had some, I believe 2 projects over the past 2 years, or 2 rounds of this program, that worked with incarcerated individuals as part of their project. It was actually the primary or target population for their project. So I think to address another piece of that, I know that I noted that small, rural, and isolated communities are given priority. That is not an eligibility requirement. Just that is a target area for this program for South Arts. And so there is priority given to those projects, but it is not an eligibility, it's not a requirement. And we most certainly will fund projects that don't, that are not in rural or isolated communities. And if you look back, again, looking back at that list of grants from previous years, this was a priority last year as well. And you can see how that really played out in terms of the projects that were funded.
Great. Somebody else asked for a clarification on what was meant by continuing projects. Does this mean that the project was already an existing project prior to this program or support, or does that mean that it has already received previous rounds of cross-sector impact grants funding?
Another good clarification. So when we talked about continuing projects throughout this presentation, that is for projects that received previous support through cross-sector impact grants. So they received funding either in round 1 and or round 2. And so that is a continuing project.
Thank you. We have another question. If you can confirm whether one of the principal partners may be able to provide financial support for the project.
Absolutely. So the two principal partners, the two partners in this project can certainly provide financial support for the project.
Great.
And actually just to add a little bit more there, when you're looking at building your budget and that match, your match may come from a number of sources. And in this case, it might be that you have cash on hand that you'll be using to meet your match. And that is an absolutely eligible source in terms of additional funds for your project. And that may come from either one of the partners.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question about whether the non-arts partner may be a school or a school district, in particular, one that does not currently offer arts education during the school day.
That's another great question. And for this program, educational preschool or K through 12 institutions may not be one of the primary partners. So they may not be one of the two principal partners. However, remember that there may be additional individuals or institutions that are involved in the implementation or that participate in the outcomes of the project or program. And so a K through 12 institution may be one of those additional, but the two primary partners, neither may be a K through 12 institution.
Great. Somebody else was asking if the non-artist partner needs to be an organizational entity. For instance, if one partner is a community collective or an individual, does the non-arts partner need to be an LLC or a 501c3?
So in that specific circumstance, remember that one of the two partners must be a 501c3 nonprofit or unit of government. Unit of government, we went over maybe an institution or a organization. We often have, a community, a theater, or a division of government that could be eligible under this program, but one of the two partners must be a 501c3 organization or a unit of state or local government.
And similarly, somebody wants to know if an arts agency is eligible.
So without knowing any more about that specific circumstance, I can't answer directly, but again, any arts organization may be one of the partners. So I'd say most likely yes, with an asterisk, as long as all of the other requirements that we've gone over and that are in the guidelines are met.
Great. Somebody wants to confirm the comments about funds exchanged between additional partners. Does this mean that if there is another nonprofit partner or government agency involved beyond the two applicants, that the two applicants cannot receive funding from that third additional partner?
Again, I would want to talk to this applicant a little bit more about their application specifically, but the guidelines lay out that any additional entities, because they're not subject to all of the other requirements and regulations of this program, there may not be funds exchanged. So none of the grant funding may go to those additional partners.
Thank you. And just to clarify from that question, it was asking about if funding can come from a third additional partner. And I believe the answer to that would be yes, and that you could use that to count towards the match as well because that would be income generated for the project.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And that goes back to, these projects or programs, if you're doing any sort of, I'll call it a program for individuals, it may require a fee or a ticket, and that's okay. You may, part of your program or project design might include, a fee to participants, and that is allowable through this program. The restriction that we're talking about here in terms of additional partners not being able to receive any funds from the grants. And this ties back to some of the restrictions around who an eligible applicant is and the federal funds that are involved here.
Somebody is asking, they're a Native American Studies Center tied to a university. Native art is a huge part of their work, but they are also interdisciplinary. Would they be considered the arts applicant or the non-arts applicant?
It's an excellent question, and I would need to look at their specific situation in a little more detail.
Great.
But we'd love to have them as an applicant, and I'd be happy to work that through with them.
During the eligibility section, you mentioned something about applicants can't appear on a list, and somebody's asking if you could clarify what that list is and if it's possible to find out whether or not they are on that list.
I think we're talking about the federal disbarment list. And this is if you've had a federal grant in the past that you did not meet all the requirements for, or didn't submit everything that you were supposed to, you're no longer allowed to receive federal money. I'd say that if you're on that list, you most likely know that you're on the list. And I believe there is a place to double check that. But without having that in front of me, I can't give you that link off the top of my head. But there is somewhere that you can check that disbarment. That said, you most likely know if you're on that list, and this applies to very, very few of us. So as long as you've met all your requirements for federal grants in the past.
We've had a few people asking whether being a current South Arts grant recipient from another program or a potential applicant for another South Arts grant program would possibly impact the eligibility for cross-sector impact grants.
Another excellent question. And the short answer is no. Having received or being in the mix, I'd say, meaning having applied for any other programs through South Arts does not prohibit you from applying through this program. This would be a different program or project that you're applying for through this program, and that's absolutely allowable.
Thank you. Also, I believe that funds from one South Arts grant cannot be used as matching funds for another South Arts grant.
Absolutely.
We've had a few people asking about city requirements, government entities. Can you please clarify so that I'm understanding correctly? We are required to have two partners, one arts and one non-arts related. Would a city entity count as a non-arts partner or an arts partner?
It depends on what that city entity is. So if it's the Arts Council for the city of Green Grass, and the Arts Council is part of city government, then they would be the arts entity. But if it's the division that works with homelessness in that city, they'd be the non-arts partner.
We had another person asking, you mentioned that two university departments cannot partner with each other. Does that same rule apply to departments within a city?
Correct. Yes, it does.
Great. Would a transportation entity be considerable as a partnership organization?
I think, again, I would love to know a little bit more detail, but the short answer is yes. Absolutely. And we've seen, again, if you look at grants in the past, it's been arts and transportation. You know, you can use that broadly, but using the arts to advance an issue or concern around transportation.
Great. Somebody's asking if somebody who runs or works at the non-arts organization in the partnership is on the board of the arts organization, does that present any issues for eligibility?
That is not part of the eligibility criteria for this program or project. We are not looking at the board. So no.
We have somebody who is asking if the events can be targeted event, if the events can be ticketed and the one for the public be free, or must all the events be free?
So ticketing is absolutely allowable. Your public-facing event, at least one of them must be open to and marketed to, available to anyone who wishes to attend, and that can be with or without a ticket. It just has to be available to anyone who wishes to attend.
We have some budget questions coming up. Some people are asking if salary would be considered a cash match or an in-kind match.
So going back to that overhead and indirect expenses, for this program, a portion of salary is not allowable as one of your expenses. However, if you are hiring individuals specifically for this project or program, if you have someone that you're providing them with a contract to pay them, that is absolutely allowable. However, general salary for someone who's on a fixed salary from the organization does fall under that overhead or an indirect expense for this program.
And somebody is asking about what sources may be used for these matching funds, if they can come from another grant, and are any sources ineligible, such as state, federal, or private funds?
Some of these little details you can find in the guidelines as well. So your match can come from a variety of sources. So other grants are absolutely eligible, individual donations, cash on hand, program fees, all of those make for great matching funds. The only funds that are ineligible are other federal funds. So federal grants, and the tricky piece of that is just to be careful with of course, any other South Arts grants cannot be used as the match. And if you have grants from other, perhaps a state arts agency, sometimes those include federal funds. So we would need to double check and make sure that that wasn't a pass through of federal funds matching the grant.
So we've got about 2 minutes left. I'll ask a few more questions. And then if your question does not get answered or asked, please be sure to check out our guidelines to see if your question has been addressed there. Please look at the frequently asked questions section of our website, and we will also post this webinar recording on our website within 48 hours. So another budget question we had was whether food, snacks, lunch could be part of the program expenses, or if that is not an eligible expense.
Food that's directly related to carrying out your program or project may be included. It is eligible. Alcoholic beverages are ineligible for alcohol. And
then we had a few questions about the possibility of using these funds to create work, such as part of a documentary or a permanent mural project, or another question was essentially what creating new work might mean in that eligibility.
So I'll address this again generally to wrap us up here, but a permanent public art project is ineligible for this program, and that comes back to capital expenses being ineligible. And that's tied to the federal funds, and that's a requirement that just comes with this money. So for purposes of this program, we've defined temporary public art is eligible, and we've defined temporary is meant to be exhibited or shown for 1 year or less. I'm always happy to answer any specific questions you might have around your program or project, but generally speaking, permanent public art pieces are ineligible. Going back to the creation question, again, this project or this grant program is really about supporting partnerships that address or advance an issue of importance in your community. And so using the arts and creating, artworks through this project or program is absolutely allowable. However, this is not a creation grant, meaning that the purpose of your program or project may not be simply for the artistic creation of something. It has to be about how you're using the arts to advance this issue in your community. And so that means that creation of work is absolutely allowable as long as it's a secondary outcome, meaning that whatever the issue is that you're trying to address is the primary reason you're doing this project. In addition, work that is created by participants in the program or project is absolutely allowable as well. So this is about the arts. There's going to be art created, but the primary purpose or outcome of your program cannot be simply the creation of work. And I think this is a great time or example of when going back and looking at some of those previous projects on the website can be incredibly helpful if you have questions around that. So,
great. Thank you so much, Michelle. I wish we had time to answer all of the questions that have come up in the Q&A box. There are definitely quite a few more excellent questions. People who did not have their questions answered, please, I do encourage you to check out our website, look at the Q&A, the FAQ on our website, and also if your question is not answered in any of those locations or elsewhere in this presentation, which will be posted on our website within 48 hours, please reach out to Michelle at partnerships@southarts.org.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and I look forward to reading all of your letters of interest.
Thank you, everybody.